Awesome. Well, Kari, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about your topic?
Sure thing. So my name is Kari Elias, and I'm a talent acquisition manager. I've been working for Be the Match for the past 2 years, but I have over 20 years of experience. I've worked both in corporate and agency settings, so I kind of understand what it's like from the back end to be searching for a job on kind of what you might experience or hear, and how you can kind of have some of these meaningful conversations so that everybody feels good about what they're getting paid. So that's a little bit about me. um, just to get things started, is it okay if I share a presentation? Are you okay with that? Okay. I do better with a crutch, I guess, if you will. So I put together just just a little deck here. Oops, hang on. Now I am not feeling comfortable. Here we go. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, I'm gonna share this. Okay, so a little bit just to talk about paid conversations. And what I will tell you all is if you have questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to ask. I love it when it's a little more back and forth and you're like, what about this scenario or this scenario? Because odds are I've been through the scenario, either as a TA partner or recruiter and or as somebody who is maybe even in the search for a job. So, and I actually have the wrong titles page, so I apologize for that. This is about pay conversations. We can do an interview another time. So here's what I always tell candidates when they come to me. They're like, oh, I don't know how to talk about pay. And that's probably one of the most common questions I get. Like, what should I tell them I want to get paid? And so what I always tell them is do your homework. What's your number? Make sure you know what your number is. Also, for most people, it's not always about money. So really think through what that means to you. Like, I have to at least make this amount, but these are some of the things that I also consider when I'm getting paid. Also, there's no harm in asking. I always tell candidates, like, if they're like, "Ooh, I don't know," I actually had just done this with a friend of mine. She was like, "I was getting paid 70,000. I'm willing to do 60." And I said, "Well, ask, will they pay you 70?" And she got very close. The job only paid 60, but she got very close to 70. So, it's just little things like that. You can kind of just ask the question and then really work towards a win strategy. So and I got these tips from salary.com. I'll talk a little bit about that and I'll give you some tips and suggestions on that. But a couple of things for you to be aware of, because I myself work for Be the Match. We're the National Marrow Donor Program. Most of our positions, I would say like 70%, 70 to 80% of our positions are fully remote. So that means we are recruiting people from all over the United States. So if you are somebody who's in the market for a job, and especially if there's companies hiring for remote positions that you're interested in, the world is all of a sudden your oyster. Like, you could go anywhere in the United States for positions and apply for positions. So there's some things you should know going into it. There are some states that have pay transparency laws. So in the United States, there's not a ton of them, but more and more people are getting to the point where they're disclosing pay ranges. I know for my team at Be the Match, when I tell them, if a candidate asks you what the pay range is, tell them. And so we're very upfront and honest about that. But currently, it's actually a law in the states that you can maybe kind of see here. But Seattle and Seattle, Washington, California, Nevada, Colorado, Maryland, and Connecticut and Rhode Island are currently the states that, if you are applying for a job there, or if the company is based out of there, it is very likely they will post their jobs or have them the pay ranges available to you. And or if you are talking to a talent acquisition or recruiter, they can disclose those rates to you, the pay rates to you. So the reason this is kind of become a thing, or this is starting to become law, is really to help with the equal pay movements. So most often women are earning 70% on the dollar to what a man earns. So in order to like close that gap, states are recognizing like, let's just pay people what the job is worth versus, you know, if you're a bad negotiator, you won't get paid as well. And I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this for over 20 years. It is just, women do not know how to ask for pay. And it's gotten better and it's more equal now that some of these laws are coming into play. Also, if an employer asks you for what you've been paid in your last position, in most states currently, it's actually illegal for them to ask that. So there are a few states that they cannot, it's actually, they cannot ask you how much you were getting paid. But more and more, even though like you see Minnesota is one of the gray states, more and more companies are just adopting, don't ask people their salary range. So if you're talking to an employer that's like, oh, what'd you get paid on your last position? You may want to think about like, is that the right place for you to work? Because most companies will not ask that anymore. You shouldn't get paid based on what you were getting paid in your last position. You should get paid on the work you're doing for the job you're doing. Okay, so I mentioned this, salary.com. Salary.com is a really great place. If you're starting to do your homework, you're applying for a position and you're kind of curious what it's going to pay, I recommend salary.com. Now you can go out here and you can kind of mess around with like what job listings are, how much these positions typically pay. Now, one caveat I will put on this is salary.com is self-disclosed. So some people will include like their bonuses, they'll include their benefits, but it does give you an indication of what positions are paying in certain areas. Another really good resource, and I should have put this website on here, so I'm going to apologize for those of you that work for the state, but the Minnesota Department of Economic Development has awesome data on what positions pay. Now, the only catch on that is the state of Minnesota codes jobs in a certain way. So like, I'll give you an example. If you're looking for a software engineer position, software engineers can mean a lot of different things in a lot of companies. Like we have at Be the Match, we have Salesforce software engineers, we have Java engineers, we have, there's a whole bunch of different skill sets. So sometimes the generic title doesn't encompass all of the different types of what a person does, because Salesforce is a technology that's a little more niche and there's not as many people that do that. So they tend to get paid a little higher. Whereas Java developers, there's more Java developers out there. So probably those professionals are more aligned to what the software engineer coding would be on the state of Minnesota. But if it's helpful, I can get that website off to everybody. But salary.com, if you start doing research on Google, like how much does a customer service rep get paid? Like salary.com will come up on your Google feed right away. And it's just kind of a quick tool that you can easily mess around with and just kind of figure out the basics of what something pays. So in this example, I just did recruiter because I hire a lot of recruiters. And actually, sometimes people in the military have done recruiter positions, like they were recruiting folks to be in the military. So a lot of those people end up becoming corporate recruiters or staffing firm recruiters. But in this particular example, I just looked up the recruiter level 2. And then it kind of gives you a little bit more of an overview, but you can see that the salary range in here is 60 to 79,000. Truth be told, I ran this, I think about 6 to 8 months ago, so it's a little outdated. And I think even the dollar amount may have gone up slightly, but not like significantly. So this is actually pretty close to what I would pay recruiter level 2 at Be the Match. So I always say, like, be prepared with your conversations, kind of know what your walk away points are. Also understand what a company is offering you. So I had somebody tell me, I work for Be the Match, I've said a couple times, and they're like, Kari, you have to tell people about our parental leave benefits. We have really good parental leave benefits. And I was like, I would have no idea. I have no plans to have any more children. So like, find out, like, what is your scenario and what do you need from a job? If you plan on expanding your family, does the company offer, because we have benefits for not only the mom, but for the dad as well. We have it for partners, if you have a partner. So there's a lot of like benefits, and people put a lot of weight in that. So when you're thinking about what you're looking for a company, kind of factor in how much all of that costs. The other thing that I always brag to candidates about at Be the Match is you get 24 days of PTO day one. I worked in a job for 13 years and got 26 days of PTO. It took me one day to get 24 days of PTO in my current position. Like, I was shocked by that. I thought that was great. And if you calculate 24 days times what your salary hourly rate is, like, that's a lot of money that you get paid on your paid time off. So something you can think about, like, if you're not quite in the salary range that you want to be, like, what are the other things that companies are offering you? The other things to consider, do you want to get additional education or specific training, and will this company offer that to you? There's all of those types of opportunities. But I always tell candidates, if you're going to start a conversation with a recruiter, and usually that's the first person you talk to, typically it is HR that's kind of telling the recruiter like what can be paid for various positions. Just start off by saying, they may ask you, because in Minnesota they can ask you, they can say, how much do you want to get paid for this position? And you can either tell them, or I would say reverse the question and say, I would like to be paid fairly for this position. What is the salary range for this role? And it is absolutely acceptable to ask it. Most of the time, a recruiter will tell you. Sometimes they're going to push you a little further just to try to get a number or an idea. But that's where hopefully you've taken some time to do that salary.com, because I will tell you, salary.com probably pays a little higher than if you did a comparison with the state of Minnesota and the salary.com websites. You'll see salary.com usually has a little bit higher of an income rate than what the state is. And the state is all like tax reported data. So it's real data. Salary.com is self-reported. But if you go a little higher, if you start higher, that's going to get you kind of in a better scenario than if you start lower, if that makes sense. So what questions do you have for me? I try to keep it to 20 minutes and then I talked really fast.